2026 is shaping up to be a turning point for U.S. immigration enforcement, and this time, the rules are being applied faster, harder, and with far less tolerance. Deportation orders are rising, visa reviews are accelerating, and enforcement actions that once took years are now happening in months, sometimes weeks. Behind the political noise, real changes are already in motion. Certain countries are being flagged more often. Certain violations are being prioritized. And for many immigrants, one small mistake, even an old one, is suddenly enough to put everything at risk. In this video, we're breaking down 7 Asian countries whose nationals are facing the most intense deportation pressure in 2026, not based on rumors, but on enforcement patterns and policy direction. As this list unfolds, a clear trend will emerge, and by the time we reach number 1, the scale of enforcement may surprise you. Let's begin. Number 7. Bangladesh. In 2026, Bangladeshi immigrants are facing some of the most aggressive deportation enforcement seen in years. Across the United States, thousands of cases are being reviewed, reopened, or fast-tracked. And for many families, the risk of removal is no longer theoretical. It's happening in real time. So why is Bangladesh suddenly under heavier scrutiny? One major reason is visa overstays. Immigration data shows a growing number of Bangladeshi nationals entering the U.S. on student or tourist visas and remaining after those visas expire. Under the current enforcement strategy, overstays are no longer treated as low-priority violations. They are now one of the fastest ways to trigger removal proceedings, even for people who have lived quietly in the U.S. for years. Unauthorized employment is another key factor. Many Bangladeshi immigrants work in industries like construction, restaurants, retail, and delivery services, often without proper work authorization. As workplace audits and enforcement actions expand in 2026, employees found without valid authorization are being detained alongside employers facing penalties. One inspection can change everything instantly. Document verification issues are also adding pressure. U.S. immigration officials have flagged an increase in applications involving inconsistent or unverifiable records. Even when fraud is not intentional, incomplete paperwork or inaccurate information can raise red flags. And once scrutiny begins, it rarely stops at just one issue. Family-based immigration violations play a role as well. Authorities are closely examining sponsorships and marriages to ensure they meet legal standards. When irregularities are found, even years later, both applicants and sponsors can face serious consequences, including deportation orders. The result is a perfect storm. In 2026, Bangladeshi immigrants without solid legal status, expired visas, or work authorization are facing the highest deportation risks the community has seen in a long time. For many, the rules didn't just change, the tolerance did. And before we move on to the next country, take a second and comment where you're watching from. We always like to see how global this conversation really is. Number 6, Nepal. In 2026, Nepali immigrants are coming under intensified deportation pressure as U.S. enforcement agencies zero in on patterns that have quietly grown over the past few years. What once slipped through administrative cracks is now being flagged, reviewed, and acted on quickly. One of the biggest drivers is visa overstays. A noticeable number of Nepali nationals entered the U.S. on temporary visas and never departed. Under the current enforcement model, overstays are no longer considered minor technical violations. They are treated as clear grounds for removal, especially when paired with other issues in a person's record. Another growing concern involves visa fraud linked to unauthorized consultants. Investigations have revealed cases where individuals were misled into submitting applications with inaccurate information or unrealistic claims, often promised shortcuts to permanent status that never existed. When these applications are reviewed years later, the consequences fall entirely on the applicant, not the consultant who disappeared. Unauthorized employment is also under the microscope. Many Nepali immigrants work in restaurants, cleaning services, caregiving, and construction. As workplace enforcement expands, people without valid work authorization are being identified during routine inspections, sometimes leading to immediate detention and the start of deportation proceedings. There's also the issue of document verification. Nepal's limited digital record systems make background checks more complex for U.S. officials. When records can't be easily verified, applications face delays, denials, or deeper scrutiny even when no wrongdoing is intended. In today's climate, uncertainty alone can be enough to trigger enforcement action. All of this adds up to a sharp shift in risk. In 2026, Nepali immigrants who overstayed visas, worked without authorization, or relied on flawed applications now face far higher chances of removal than in previous years. For many families, stability that once felt secure now feels increasingly fragile. And next, the situation becomes even more complicated. Let's move on to number 5. Number 5, Myanmar. In 2026, Myanmar nationals are facing an especially difficult reality. Even as the country continues to struggle with political unrest and humanitarian crisis, deportation enforcement in the United States is moving forward with far less flexibility than many expected. A major reason is the sharp review of asylum cases. Over the past several years, thousands of people from Myanmar entered the U.S. seeking protection from violence, persecution, and instability. While some were approved, many applications were denied or left unresolved. Under the current enforcement approach, denied or expired asylum cases are no longer sitting idle. They are being reopened, and deportation orders are being issued. Humanitarian protections are also narrowing. Policies that once allowed broader discretion are now being tightened, reducing the number of people who qualify for relief. This means individuals who believe their cases were strong are suddenly finding themselves out of options despite conditions back home remaining dangerous. Visa violations add another layer of risk. Some Myanmar nationals entered on student or visitor visas and stayed beyond their permitted time. Others violated the terms of their temporary status by working without authorization. In 2026, these violations are being enforced aggressively with little tolerance for past leniency. Background verification presents additional challenges. Due to instability and inconsistent record-keeping in Myanmar, U.S. officials often struggle to confirm personal histories. When verification is difficult, applications face higher rejection rates and uncertainty often works against the applicant, not in their favor. The result is a painful contradiction. In 2026, Myanmar nationals without approved asylum, valid visas, or clear documentation are facing some of the highest deportation risks, even as humanitarian concerns persist. For families who believe safety in the U.S. was permanent, the ground is shifting fast, and as you'll see next, the pressure doesn't stop there. Let's move on to the next country. Number 4, Cambodia. In 2026, Cambodian immigrants are confronting a wave of deportation enforcement that is reaching far beyond recent arrivals. For many, the risk isn't tied to new violations. It's tied to decisions made decades ago. One of the biggest drivers is criminal-based removals. U.S. immigration policy now places renewed emphasis on deporting non-citizens with criminal records, even for offenses that are minor or long in the past. Many Cambodian immigrants arrived in the United States as refugees years ago, but never completed the naturalization process. That single gap is now proving costly. A conviction from years earlier, even one that resulted in probation, can trigger removal proceedings today. Another major factor is increased cooperation between the U.S. and Cambodian governments. Repatriation agreements have made it easier for deportations to move forward, removing barriers that once delayed or prevented removals. Cases that sat unresolved for years are now being processed quickly, often catching families off guard. Visa violations also remain a concern. Some Cambodian nationals entered on temporary visas and overstayed. Others violated work authorization rules or accepted employment without proper documentation. With expanded workplace enforcement and community-based operations, these cases are being identified at a much higher rate in 2026. Gang-related enforcement has intensified as well. Authorities are aggressively targeting individuals with suspected gang affiliations, and even unproven associations can lead to serious scrutiny. Old records are being re-examined, and prior contact with law enforcement is enough to reopen cases that were once considered closed. The impact is deeply personal. Long-term residents are being separated from their families. Parents who built lives in the U.S. are facing removal to a country they barely remember. Children born in America are watching stability disappear almost overnight. In 2026, Cambodian immigrants who are not U.S. citizens, especially those with any criminal history or unresolved immigration issues, face some of the highest deportation risks in decades. What once felt settled is now being questioned, and for many, time has not erased vulnerability. Up next, the stakes rise even higher. Let's move to the next country. Number 3, Pakistan. In 2026, Pakistani immigrants are facing some of the most intense deportation pressure seen in years, driven by a combination of security screening, visa enforcement, and heightened scrutiny that leaves very little room for error. National security concerns sit at the center of this shift. Under the current enforcement framework, Pakistani nationals are subject to deeper background checks and more frequent case reviews. Any inconsistency, even something as small as outdated information or missing records, can trigger removal proceedings. Cases that once moved slowly are now being decided quickly, often with serious consequences. Visa overstays are another major factor. Data shows a steady rise in Pakistani nationals who entered the U.S. on student, tourist, or work visas and remained after expiration. In 2026, overstays are treated as priority violations. Once flagged, individuals can face detention and deportation, even if they have no criminal history and have lived in the U.S. for years. Unauthorized employment is also drawing aggressive enforcement. Many Pakistani immigrants work in restaurants, retail stores, gas stations, and service industries. With workplace audits and surprise inspections increasing, individuals found working without valid authorization are being placed directly into removal proceedings, sometimes without warning. Document verification issues add further risk. U.S. immigration officials have identified cases involving inconsistent or unverifiable paperwork, particularly from regions where record-keeping is limited, even when fraud is not intentional. Suspicion alone can result in denied applications, revoked visas, or deportation orders. Family-based immigration cases are under pressure as well. Authorities are closely examining sponsorships and marriages for compliance. When violations are discovered, even years later, both sponsors and applicants can face serious legal consequences. The combined effect is widespread fear and uncertainty. Students worry about sudden visa cancellations. Workers fear workplace raids. Families brace for separation. In 2026, Pakistani immigrants without solid legal status, valid visas, or clean documentation are among the most vulnerable Asian communities facing removal under current enforcement priorities. And next, the situation becomes even more complex and emotionally charged. Let's move on to the next country. Number 2, Afghanistan. In 2026, Afghan nationals are facing one of the most emotionally charged and controversial deportation situations in the United States. Despite ongoing instability, violence, and humanitarian concerns back home, enforcement actions are accelerating, and for many families, protection that once felt guaranteed is now slipping away. A major reason is the tightening review of asylum cases. Thousands of Afghans entered the U.S. seeking safety from persecution and conflict. While some were granted protection, many applications were denied or left pending for years. Under current policy, denied or expired asylum cases are no longer paused or overlooked. They are being actively processed, often resulting in deportation orders. Temporary protections are also under threat. Some Afghan nationals were allowed to remain in the U.S. under special programs or humanitarian status due to conditions in their country. In 2026, these protections are being reassessed, limited, or allowed to expire. When that happens, individuals who followed the rules suddenly find themselves without legal status and at risk of removal. Security vetting plays a central role. Afghan nationals undergo some of the most rigorous background checks of any group. Anyone unable to pass these screenings or whose records raise unanswered questions can face deportation even without criminal activity. The threshold for concern is low, and the consequences are high. Visa violations add further pressure. Some Afghans overstayed student or visitor visas. Others violated the terms of admission by working without authorization. In today's enforcement climate, these violations are pursued aggressively regardless of personal circumstances or humanitarian concerns. Even individuals who supported U.S. military or government operations are not immune. Documentation gaps, delayed processing, or administrative errors have placed some former interpreters and support staff into removal proceedings, despite their service. The impact is devastating. Families who believed they had found safety now live with constant uncertainty. Children raised in the U.S. face the possibility of being sent to places they've never known. Futures are being rewritten overnight. In 2026, Afghan nationals without approved asylum, valid legal status, or flawless documentation face significant deportation risks as enforcement priorities emphasize strict compliance over compassionate exceptions. And now we arrive at number 1. This is the country facing the most aggressive enforcement of all. Number 1, China. In 2026, China stands at the center of the most aggressive immigration enforcement targeting any Asian country. Thousands of Chinese nationals across the United States are being placed under intensified scrutiny, and the scale of enforcement is unlike anything seen before. At the core of this push are geopolitical and national security tensions. China is viewed as a strategic rival, and that reality is directly shaping immigration policy. Chinese nationals are now subject to deeper background checks, expanded monitoring, and faster enforcement decisions. Applications that once moved routinely are now paused, reviewed, and in many cases denied or revoked. Espionage and intellectual property concerns are driving much of this enforcement. Students, researchers, and professionals working in technology, engineering, and scientific fields are facing heightened vetting. Even lawful visa holders are seeing sudden cancellations if their work or academic ties raise concerns. Entire careers are being disrupted, sometimes overnight. Visa overstays remain a major trigger. Large numbers of Chinese nationals enter the U.S. each year on student, tourist, or work visas. In 2026, overstays from China are among the highest enforcement priorities. Once flagged, cases move quickly toward detention and deportation, regardless of how long someone has lived in the country. Unauthorized employment is also under heavy enforcement. Many Chinese immigrants work in restaurants, construction, salons, and service industries without proper authorization. With increased workplace audits and inspections, entire communities are being affected as arrests and removal proceedings rise sharply. Fraud-related concerns further amplify enforcement. U.S. officials have identified cases involving fake documents, arranged marriages, and false asylum claims. While not representative of the entire community, these cases have led to broader crackdowns that impact legitimate applicants as well. Birth tourism investigations have added another layer. Authorities are targeting individuals suspected of using tourist visas to give birth in the U.S. for citizenship purposes, leading to visa denials, revocations, and deportation actions tied to past travel even years later. Student visa revocations are increasing rapidly. Chinese students in certain fields are losing legal status due to security reviews, forcing many to leave the country despite following visa rules. Technology sector workers face similar risks as employment authorizations are reevaluated. In 2026, Chinese nationals face the strictest immigration enforcement of any Asian group. Whether due to security screening, visa violations, employment issues, or fraud investigations, those without perfect legal standing face the highest deportation risks, making China the top priority for removal operations. And now the bigger question: do you think these deportation policies are necessary for enforcement, or are they going too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them and I reply. My name is Fernando. This is US Policy Brief. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more updates and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Stay informed, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next one.